Hey, Supervisor Conley, smile. Better.
I can hear you this time. I gave up last meeting, went home.
Don't we just love all this internet stuff? Sometimes I think mine stops working because people don't want to listen to me anymore. Like home. So welcome everyone. We're making sure that those who wish to log on have been able to log on. So just watching that to see when it somewhat stops. Oh, the number is going up. So good morning, everyone. Just hang on for a couple, maybe a minute to make sure everyone's here. Aha, Board Member Ramirez, good morning.
Good morning, President Dolan.
Welcome back. We missed you. Your homework is to listen to all recordings. I know you will. Coffee. Okay, we'll go. The workshop of the Central Valley Flood Protection Board will now be opened and come to order. Good morning to you all. My name is Jane Dolan. I'm the president. I will be somewhat conducting this meeting, but relying on board staff, Ruth Darling, and DWR staff, Mary Jimenez and Jason Sidley, for the important topic regarding our plan update of climate change and how comments are being handled. So I want you all to be reminded that this is recorded. We do not have a transcript made, but it's recorded. And we are entirely virtual. So if you wish to comment, you'll need to use the hands up. And it doesn't look like there's call-ins, but if there's a call-in, it's *6, and that will indicate to Ryan Jones, who will monitor that you wish to talk. That's the welcome. You know the agenda, you know the order, so we'll get started. I'm going to ask our board clerk to call the roll so we can ascertain board members present and a quorum. Mr. Jones.
Board Member Grego.
Here.
Secretary Johnson.
I'm here. Good morning, everybody.
Board Member Ramirez.
Good morning, Chair.
Vice President Valines.
Here. Good morning.
Board Member Countryman.
I am present.
President Dolan.
I'm here. We have 6 members present. I think that we are aware that there's one vacancy. So welcome to you all. It looks like we have 86 people participating. You know, we take away the board staff and the board. We've got a healthy participation. If you do want to talk, I'll call on you by name, but not yet. So the first item on our agenda is one that is required to be on public entity agendas. It's called public comment. And I would ask if there's someone who wishes to make a comment for a subject or an interest that is not on today's agenda. And I understand we received an email from Deidre Desjarnes. I'm going to get your last name incorrect. So did you want to offer a public comment, Deidre? If you're muted, you need to unmute. I understand you wanted to comment just generally on something. But you're not unmuting yourself, so I can't listen to you. Okay, we'll move on because there'll be public comments on items on the agenda. Perhaps you can do it at that point. Is there anyone else? Ryan, you see any hands raised?
I do not see any hands raised, President Dolan. Oh, I do see. I apologize. Here's Deidre now.
Oh, she's got it. Deidre, last name I have difficulty pronouncing. I apologize. If you would unmute yourself, you can give your public comment now.
Yeah, I apologize. I was having technical difficulties.
We can all relate to that.
So I did want to say the ArcStorm, some of the ArcStorm 2.0 study results are going to be released today.
Yes, we
And,
know.
it's a real challenge, and we are really going to need to step up our emergency preparedness. We've had unprecedented flooding all over the world. And when I asked DWR's modelers what the flooding meant for California, the extreme flooding in British Columbia, they said unprecedented flooding is going to come to California as well.
No, yeah, scary.
Oh, yeah.
Keeps me up at night. The board's going to have a workshop on that. We do know that the ArcStorm release from UCLA is today. So
Yeah, and I just wanted to make this separately because the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan looks at peak 200-year flood flows, but given what's happened around the world, we should all need to be prepared for potentially more extreme event, and that's probably going to be emergency preparedness. Thank you.
yes, thank you. On our mind all the time.
Okay.
So if you'd reduce your hand, take down your hand, I won't keep calling on you every second.
Okay, great.
But I will the next time. All right.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Okay, we're on to the items for today's workshop agenda. And the first one, I will introduce Ruth Darling of board staff. She's going to give, she's got two items. She's going to give a update on the schedule of plan workshops and meetings and such. And then she will talk about how comments to the public draft are being addressed. So Ms. Darling, thank you for all of your effort and just keeping us on track and up to date on all the information and what we need to do. You're
Thank
on.
you, President Dolan. Good morning, members of the board. I'm Ruth Darling. I'm a program manager with the Central Valley Flood Protection Board. I'm also the lead for the board on the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan and its 5-year updates. And so, Ryan, are you able to share screen with the PowerPoint?
Yes, one moment, please.
Thank you. And I do know there's some technical issues with the WebEx. I got an email from a participant that said he's unable to see the WebEx screen. So sorry, Ryan, if you're trying to manage two things at once. Okay. So as President Dolan mentioned, this is, I will provide an overview of the schedule as well as recommended pathways to adoption for the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. So this is our third workshop on comments received. Next slide, please, Ryan. And next slide, please. Thank you. So our first workshop was on July 15th, and that was on comments made on the conservation strategy as well as operation and maintenance. Last week on Friday, we held a workshop on funding and policy recommendations, as well as a brief introduction on the plan's call to action. And today is our ever important topic of climate change and the climate change analysis within the 2022 Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update. And the board is proposing an adoption date of October 28th, 2022. Next slide, please.
Not yet. Stay right here, please.
Okay. Yes, go ahead.
I just these schedules are set, and folks should put August 12th on. Oh, that is today. So those are the workshops and the titles. Now it looks like there's a big gap where nothing happens, and that's not exactly correct. The workshops will end today, and then our staff and DWR are going to look at added comments, add them to what has been commented to date. And each Friday board meeting has a spot on it for plan update and plan input. So be aware of that. We don't just disappear discussing the plan between August and October. So, my comment. Thank you. Please
you.
go on. Yeah, thanks.
Okay, I'd like to provide an overview of the recommended pathways to adoption for the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update. And as many might be aware, the Flood Protection Act of 2008 states that it's at the board's discretion to revise the plan prior to adoption after comments are received and considered on the plan. So these workshops are intended to conduct a dialogue between the board, DWR, and the public to consider any potential revisions to the plan. So this slide details potential pathways for adoption. So comments can lead to revisions in the draft 2022 update. Topics can be addressed within the board's resolution of adoption, which will be presented at the October 28th workshop in addition to adopting the plan. Comments can be considered for the 2027 update or future updates. In addition, comments can be considered for other state processes like the California Water Plan. And the other column is there to address comments that were received that tend to be outside of the scope of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan. And these will be indicated in the comment log. So DWR, in coordination with the flood board, intend to produce an attachment to the plan that will have a comment log and the responses from DWR and the flood board. So that will be presented as well in October. Next slide, please. Oh, I will pause right here for any comments or questions.
Yeah, let's just look at that again. I just wanted people to have a chance to look at this and absorb it a little bit. These are not proposed pathways of handling comments, but they are what's underway. And what I understand is that there's a very large spreadsheet. Every comment is logged into that spreadsheet, by whom and what the subject matter is, and then the actual comment. Now, if someone gave 3 pages, that would not be put into this log, but the high points would be. And then there's discussion as to, with the board staff as well, and we'll be with the board, where it goes. The draft itself to be revised before it's adopted, a board resolution, which is kind of, here's what we're going to do to get things done. Perhaps it needs more study and goes future, and then there's other ways to deal with it, but they're not ignored. So you can go on, Ruth.
Thank you for that clarification, President Dolan.
No problem.
So to dive a little bit deeper into the revisions on the draft 2022 flood plan. So these may include modifications based on public comments and board direction. It may consist of editorial changes and edits or clarifications within the text of the plan. And so the board will consider the extent and importance of suggested revisions. And that's why we're here with these public workshops, is to take a deeper dive into comments received and allow the board to, at their discretion, recommend changes to the flood plan, and also to help inform the board resolution. And with that, we would like to dive into our climate change topic.
It looks like there is one hand raised.
Okay.
Well, it says Richard, Melissa, Rebecca, Young. So I'm not sure which of this family. So I see a hand raised, Richard, Melissa, Rebecca, Young. So whoever that is.
Hi, good morning. This is Becky and Richard Young. And
Good morning.
good morning. I'm sorry. We had a comment. I believe our family is on the agenda for item number 3. So I think I missed the public comment section. I wasn't sure on when you wanted us to comment.
Oh, okay. If it's regarding today's agenda, that would be now. If you missed it and you just want to say something that is not on the agenda, but you want to tell us, that would be, you can do that now.
Okay, I haven't seen a copy of the agenda, so I'm assuming, I'm not sure if we're on it or not for Young Farms Enterprises.
You're not specifically noted. We don't specifically note folks who want to just give a public comment
Okay.
that's not related.
Okay, so sorry for the confusing start, but so I'm
Not a
Peggy Young
problem.
with Joe Young Farms, my dad Richard, and also Young Farms Enterprises. And we just wanted to come to the board again today. I know the last time we spoke with you was back on January 28th regarding the second resolution of necessity for our property. And from what we recall, the board was divided in their vote on granting that resolution of necessity versus maybe delaying it 1 month to try and get a settlement and a resolution to our ongoing negotiations or lack thereof. And I know that even though the vote was divided, that it was somewhat unanimous that the board really would have liked a resolution out of DWR for us to put this behind us and move on and settle. So since then, you know, we had our board meeting on January 28th. We revised our entire package, we didn't add any line items, but we revised all our invoices, got updated quotes, and had our entire offer back to DWR on February 17th. And acted in good faith and really tried to move this forward. The second Attorney General assigned to our case, Tiffany Ikeda, she was really prompt, responded on March 1st, and actually came out for a second tour of the property. The first one was at the prior Attorney General. So Tiffany came out on March 1st. We were really excited that we were going to get somewhere with her. She came back. We had some subsequent emails where we clarified. She came out on with an email on April 18th and said that her recommendation was finalized and she was sending it through the channels of DWR, but they couldn't get us an answer because it needed to go through some channels for authorization. And she asked us to give her 10 weeks for DWR to authorize the counteroffer and settle. That would have put us on June 27th. So we said, okay, fine, if we're that close, we'll wait until June 27th, even though we thought we were going to settle within, you know, the month of February. So since then, Tiffany has left, and now we have our third Attorney General, and we've been emailing him consistently since June 27th, asking where the offer is. We've had to continue our trial date. We've had several continuances, and again, we're at the point where we're in desperation. It's been almost 7 months since the board meeting in January, where we were practically begging for any assistance in getting DWR just to come to the table and negotiate with us.
Ms. Young, this is clearly not what is on our announced public agenda today. And I know this is very serious to you. So I'm going to take the comments that you've made today, and I'm going to ask our board counsel to update the board on that at our next meeting that we can. But I really need to proceed with the agenda that we've announced for today.
Okay, yeah, understood. So
Thank you very much.
all right, thank you.
Thank you.
We hear you clearly. Okay, so we ready for this slide that is, or information that is on our screen? And I believe we start with Mary Jimenez, is that correct?
That's correct.
All right, good morning, everyone. Can I have a thumbs up if my sound is working? Thank you.
It is, good morning.
All right, good morning, President Dolan, members of the board. Thank you very much for the covering the first part, Ruth. Happy to take over from here. Very excited today to talk more about climate change in our Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update. As you all are aware, it is one of the major themes of this flood plan update, and it's also up front and foremost in many of our ongoing conversations. So a lot to be done in this regard. Preparing this 2022 update during a historic drought has presented a specific challenge, but also a great opportunity. So we are recognizing that our state's history of extreme drought, such as the one we're in now, is interrupted by severe storms and floods. The impacts of climate change on California and our flood system is intensifying those extremes and the swings between drought and flood, and thereby also having severe impacts on our flood risk. This Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update is calling specifically for flood management actions that is resilient to those impacts of climate change that are very urgent over the long term. So a lot of opportunity here in this update to reinforce and clarify these important messages. Next slide, please. The content of the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan update draft that we have right now is supported by a deep body of work in our supporting documents, as many folks are also aware. And so we have a further opportunity in looking at the climate change comments on the flood plan right now to look in deeper into those supporting documents to make sure that any revisions we make to the flood plan to respond to public comments leverage that work in more effective ways if possible, and make sure that any edits we're making to the flood plan itself are also well substantiated within that deeper body of work. And so on the technical side, we have the climate change analysis update that built upon the work of the previous flood plan, informed by new data and information. We have broadened our analysis in 2022 to now look at 3 climate change scenarios that we're calling a low, medium, and high to project a range. We are finding that all climate change stressors in this regard are telling a consistent story, and that is the increase in temperatures that are projected, the increase in extreme precipitation, and therefore increase in flood risk. And so it's all pointing in the same direction of increased flood risk and increased extremes. It is the magnitude of those increases that is uncertain when moving forward, but not the fact that those are extreme trends and it is increasing flood risk. Next slide, please. And so we are also finding in this update that despite our recent investments and some great accomplishments, our flood risk does remain high in the Central Valley flood system unless effective actions are taken. The state system-wide investment approach that is foundational to the flood plan, and in particular, the portfolio of actions underneath the state system-wide investment approach now in 2022, our analysis is showing that it does improve resilience of this flood system under the range of future conditions if sufficient investments are made. And so we do have a comprehensive and effective plan. This 2022 update is providing a greater focus on watershed-based approaches and promoting climate resilience moving forward. So a lot more work still to be done in that realm moving forward from 2022, but we're focusing in here in 2022 on watershed-based approaches. Next slide, please. We also have a new body of work in the conservation strategy update I wanted to refer to here for context today. This is Appendix H of the draft conservation strategy update that is out right now and will be under revision moving towards later this year as part of the package of documents for the board. That Appendix H describes ecosystem-related vulnerabilities and risks due to climate change, is informed by recent literature reviews, other components of the conservation strategy update, and professional scientific judgments, and does cover our entire system-wide planning area for the CVFPB. We did receive a couple of very positive comments on inclusion of this appendix in the update, and so I wanted to share that for context this morning also. Next slide, please. And so with that, I'll pause before moving on to the climate change comments.
I'm going to look for hands raised. I want participants to know this is slide 11 of 26. So this public comment request at this point is on the slides that Ms. Menace has proposed for the thoughts of how there might be some changes and revisions to the draft document. There's a whole series of slides on pretty technical analysis and maps and presentations, even a little bit of information on ArcStorm. So just want to let you know, this is not the only time to comment. However, I do see some hands. Mr. Kane, Mr. John Kane, you're up.
Hello, thank you for convening the workshop today. I'm Conservation Director at River Partners. We did submit detailed comments on climate change, as well as signed on to a group letter about the seriousness of climate change. And I'm prepared to get more into the details later in the workshop, but I wanted to convey three main messages in the interest of really speaking clearly about climate change, which I think is going to be our challenge in order to motivate people of the Central Valley, decision makers in the Central Valley, decision makers at the state, particularly the legislature, to actually act. And so the first point I want to make is that the climate change projections are really stunning, particularly for the Central Valley, where there's a median projection of a threefold increase in peak flows, with billions of dollars in projected flood risk in a region that is not even equipped to deal with the present flood risk. The optimism in the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan will significantly reduce that flood risk, but only if the state and federal governments invest in the plan's implementation. And we just need to make that crystal clear. The second point I want to make is about taking action while navigating the reality of uncertainty. There's always some uncertainty when we are trying to predict the future, particularly when we're talking about the weather and climate. It's highly certain, however, that the climate warming and the result in more it's highly certain, though, that the climate will result in more warming, which will result in more precipitation falling as rain rather than snow, particularly in the San Joaquin Valley watershed. And as someone that loves to spend time in the Sierra Nevada, I know that those upper watershed areas that usually have gotten snow in the last century are very rocky, steep areas. And when they're subjected to rain, we're going to see bigger events. And there's just a high level of certainty. And I highlight this because the plan has several paragraphs. The draft plan has several paragraphs that start with some kind of claim about uncertainty, as if there's a large amount of uncertainty. And I really thank Mary Jimenez's slide clarifying this, but I think we need to be crystal clear. And then the last point I want to make is about the need to speak clearly about protecting public safety. In the interest of clarity, the Central Valley Flood Protection Board was renamed to its current name, Protection Board from Reclamation Board. And I don't want to stand on my soapbox too much, but I think it's true to say that you're the board that has the responsibility to protect people from flooding in the Central Valley. And you have a moral responsibility to really ring the bell, ring the alarm bell about flooding in the Central Valley. To do this, we need to talk in terms that people really understand about probability. It's difficult for any of us to understand how a statistic like expected annual damages relates to us. It's even hard for me to get my head around that. How do landowners and city leaders get their head around that? We need to find a different way to talk about it. And I really encourage us to think about how, say, the USGS talks about earthquakes in the Bay Area. Thank you very much for giving me so much time.
I want to thank you for your input. Understood. We know. We talk about that in those terms all the time. And I'm very happy this is being recorded so that we can have some specificity as we look to revisions. Ms. Deidre, I would love to use your last name, but I'm pretty unsure how to pronounce. So you are.
It's French. I'm French Canadian. It's Desjardins.
Desjardins, Miss Desjardins.
Desjardins. It means of the garden.
Desjardins, that's lovely.
French.
You are
Thank
on.
you. Yeah, you're not the first person to have trouble with pronouncing my name. So yeah, I wanted to second John Kane's remarks, and we don't use expected manual damages to talk about earthquake risk. We look at the probability of a major earthquake over the next period. And that's more appropriate for a Poisson distribution. Daniel Swain has researched that there's a 50% chance of a flood event, at least as large as the 1862 flood event over the next 40 years. And I asked him about his assumptions, and he said it's essentially unchanged. So we're not communicating how the likelihood that we're going to see this kind of event at some point in the next 40 years, and it is going to have huge impacts. And in that sense, we need to be really careful about denial of, there's a kind of delay is denial of climate impacts, as Michael Mann said. And we're not going to be able to completely build our way out of flood risk. And we do really need, I was lobbying the legislature this year. The Senate climate budget proposed $1 billion in investment for flood risk reduction and dam safety. And it's being cut out of the budget. And there just isn't that kind of compelling message that this is something we're all going to have to face because of climate change. So thank you.
Understood, received. Thank you for those comments. But we at the Flood Board organization are not in denial. We would love to be in charge of every decision. Okay, we're working on it though. I don't see any other hands raised at this point. So we can, I'll ask that we proceed on the more technical analysis. Is that you, Ms. Jimenez, or?
Yes, that would be me.
Yeah, this is like the topic of discussion on a weekly basis between the Flood Board staff, board officers and DWR. And that first one is what we're really trying to work out so that people stop saying, oh, it's a drought, don't worry about it. Ms. Jimenez.
All right, thank you. And thank you very much, John and Deirdre, for being a part of the discussion today. Your comments are extremely helpful, and your continued thoughts as well. I mean, anybody else attending today on some of these complex topics and how we can improve this flood plan draft from where it's at now towards the final. So a lot of good opportunities today to have these discussions. So we've categorized the climate change comments, related comments received on the public draft into 4 major categories to inform the discussion today that you'll see on the slide. I will start by saying that due to the breadth and significance of the comments we received on climate change, that we do see needing to make some revisions to the document to reflect these. And so kind of how we make those revisions, how far do we take it? I think there's some, a range of possibilities in how we do that would be useful to discuss today with your input and the board's direction. So the first set of comments that I'd like to cover today are related to, I think we've talked already a little bit about this, but definitely would like to talk more. And that is the urgency and clarity of the climate change messaging in the flood plan and the tie to the supporting technical details. So that's the first category. The second that's already been brought up today as well in different ways that I'd love to hear more about is the relationship. We had a number of comments on the public draft related to the relationship between event-based scenarios such as the arc storm scenario that I understand is of great interest to many folks, and the CVFPB and the flood risk analyses that we conducted for 2022. The third are a number of comments related to making a tighter and more clear tie between our climate change findings in this 2022 update and the funding needs that are so urgent to support implementation. And then the last category that's a little more forward-looking is there were a number of comments related to the state system-wide investment approach itself, and begging the question or making comments about, in light of the climate change information that we have and the findings that we're making right now in 2022, what does that mean for 2027? And what are the nature of changes that should be made to the plan moving forward in light of what we're finding now? So those are the 4 categories of comments that I had planned to cover today. I did want to also start out by saying that I understand we've been asked by a few folks about our method for responding to comments in addition to the discussions here. We are preparing a comment log. So there will be written responses to all comments, including the ones discussed at the workshops and the more minor ones that maybe aren't being discussed at the workshops. We are producing a comment log associated with the flood plan, and that will be released along with the document in the fall. So we had a couple questions on that. I wanted to make sure to address that up front. Okay. All right, then, thank you. So with that, we'll move on and we'll start with the first topic. Thank you. So the first topic is again related to the climate change messaging and the tie to the technical information embedded in our suite of documents and analyses. So we did receive comments from a few folks that they felt like they had to do their review and generate comments on the main document before our team was able to release all of the technical appendices, and that made their review more challenging. I can respect that was totally the case. You know, we had the challenge in getting all of the documents out together, and I do recognize that made some folks' review more difficult. So I wanted to acknowledge that up front, and my team will continue to do the best that we can to get all information out in a timely manner. But all the documents are available now and have been for some time. The second is the climate change messaging and technical information throughout the main document, and emphasizing climate change findings in different ways in those chapters. In particular, chapters 1 to 3 are emphasized here, where we do have some coverage of climate change findings in each of those places. We think we do have quite a bit of room for improvement in this regard, in terms of clarifying and emphasizing climate change findings in the document in a better and more effective way, both within the clarity of the documentation, as well as how we're highlighting results and findings in those chapters. We have specific ideas on maybe including also additional references to the technical report and appendices in a few key places, and then more to be done to improve the graphics. And so I'll just say that, you know, the graphics will be kind of a subsequent discussion on other slides, but I do want to pause here around emphasizing the climate change findings, kind of aside from the graphics, more or better in the first 3 chapters. I think there's 2 considerations for discussion here for that. One would be, do we add more detail? You know, in other words, do we bring more detail out of the supporting documents into the narrative in any or into all of those chapters? Number 1. And or do we bring different details in than we've highlighted? And also, would it be a good idea to maybe move more of the climate change findings more up front in the narrative? In other words, are the things that we cover maybe in chapters 2 or 3 that would be more useful to put more up front in chapter 1? So those were just kind of a few of the ideas that I wanted to put out there that our team is brainstorming. I did want to hear from the board and others. How far should we take bringing in that technical detail? Would it help to change where in the narrative some things are highlighted? Would it help to highlight some different facts or findings? And open that up for more discussion if I could.
You're asking for it. Let me see if my board members want to take that on first. We clearly have all kinds of opportunities right up to adoption, but you want to say something now, board members? Please do.
I'll take a shot. This is Brian.
Secretary Johnson.
So I'll say that I agree with the commenters who have said increasing the prominence of the key finding and being clear about that and not getting lost in sources of uncertainty that aren't central to the key point about what is known. And some combination of clarity of prose and graphics and very vivid details, takeaway points, prominent and early in the document, definitely seems to make sense to me. And I'll say, that I, John and Deirdre, I also like the suggestion of people in our community, going back to, how folks talk about earthquake risk and in particular, and maybe other fields of risk for best communication practices. I like that idea a lot. As far as the level of detail, I think I haven't thought about that quite as much, but I would suggest that we want the plan to have enough detail for people who are moderately interested in the detail to be able to understand what's going on without needing to go find the technical appendices, but not so much that it undermines the messaging by making it seem like there's too much going on here, for people to understand.
Yeah, that's the balance.
Good Chair.
Member Grego.
Yeah, I agree with Board Member Johnson on that. And just to share with you, I've been through 2 levee failures. My thoughts every year about this time is, what kind of winter are we going to have this year? We had very windy, very hot summer. What's going to happen this year? And for somebody that's been through 2 floods, this is a constant reminder every year, what's going to happen this year. So, there doesn't seem to be enough money, though I wish there was, to fix everything that needed to be fixed. But preparing your community is probably the most important thing, is knowing, working with the locals on how to prepare the community if those conditions happen, where you have flooding or a levee failure. I think that's, has to be said. It's part of, I think, what we do here is to look at the whole picture. Three Rivers did something very unique, and it showed that levees don't have to have one set of pathways. It can be done differently. But I think that from my experience, that educating the communities about floods is really important, making sure that your first responders know how to evacuate neighborhoods.
And talk to each other and people who might be in danger. Yes, it happens, and then we all go, what do we do? We need to know before. Thank you for that. Any other board members? You just talk. I don't see your hands up. I'm gonna go on. Okay. I see Amy Merrill to make a comment here. Your hand is up. Ms. Merrill, you're on.
Hi, thanks a lot for calling on me, and thanks for having this meeting. I don't know how to get my video on while I'm talking, so.
We can hear you. Yeah, good morning.
Okay, good. I really agree with what Mary Jane Grigio, did I say that right?
Grego.
Thank you.
What was just said, I super agree with that, and I'm just thinking I've also been working on some groups on fire safety. And there's a lot of local fire safe councils where communities get together. It's volunteer, it's individuals, and people get together and they inform one another, and they develop really explicit escape routes, and they support one another in fuels management and sort of, the practical stuff that needs to get done to save lives, and in anticipation, proactively. And so I guess I'm saying what I'm thinking of, and maybe this, I'm not sure if this is appropriate, so just take it as a suggestion. It could be so much as a whole chapter in the Central Valley Flood Protection Plan for communication, like a whole chapter on just communicating to the public. How are we going to do it? And I know I'm a scientist. I'm not like a communications person. So there's people that really know how to do that. And they know how to communicate maybe scary things without having everyone completely freak out, but develop the appropriate amount of anxiety in order to act. So I guess I'm just suggesting maybe really put a real focus on communicating what the situation is likely to be, could be, you know, better safe than sorry, and then develop an outreach plan for communicating what the fundamental risks that are projected, what the potential, you know, safety responses are with local communities, and then go about and execute it. And obviously, I know ka-ching, all of that requires money, but those dollars translate to lives. Just a suggestion, and I'm really echoing what other people have said, but maybe saying, do it as like a real chapter, like just really do it. Okay, I'm done. Thank you.
Or an action plan we look at every single week. Yes, thank you for that.
Okay, sure.
Desjardins, Ms. Desjardins, your hand is up again.
Oops, sorry. Amy Merrill's comments, this is something, so I've been studying social network weaving and climate adaptation, and studies have shown that community members, and they're in wildfires and other climate disasters, do better if people have do better as survivors if they have stronger community contacts. They do better in evacuation. They have less post-traumatic stress disorder afterwards, and so on. And I actually recommended, the governor is funding community resilience now, climate resilience networks, but they're not incorporating it. It's more for heat right now, but it could also include flooding and other climate disasters. And I think this kind of networking and community outreach and building it into all of our disaster response is going to be really important. And it's also a network for education.
Thank you. Understood. Okay. Are we ready to move on? Oh, nope. Mr. Nomalini?
Yes.
Hand is up, and then Mr. Kane. Mr. Nomalini, you're up.
Okay, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
All right, well, I think that it's very important to recognize what it seems everybody is recognizing, that the ability to get funding and complete major projects is extremely difficult.
Yes.
But the evacuation and the ability to protect our communities is dependent on the highways and roadways that we have and the existing structures that are already in place. In 1986, Twin Cities Road at I-5 flooded, and not one thing has been done since that time to avoid that blockage, which really plays a major part in evacuation of the whole region. And I think that we need to look at our existing structures and what we have to go through in order to repair those, whether it's taking care of encroachments or whatever. And what we need to do is streamline our permitting process so we can actually get done what we have to do with what we have. And at the same time, fight for the funding to get the improvements that everybody thinks we need. The Corps of Engineers doesn't seem to be in accord with the state, or at least with the locals, on the necessity to expedite permitting for the needed repair work on the project levees. And they don't see a federal interest in the highway system. In the past, I've run into comments from them that, well, that's the Department of Transportation's responsibility. So I think we ought to focus in on really what we have, in addition to the long-range planning, of course, on what we have and how we can better protect what we already have in place and perform the evacuations that we're surely going to have to do if any of this climate change results itself. And I think the odds are it's going to occur. So anyway, I think we have to look not only at the broader thing, but we have to emphasize our present efforts to maintain what we have, including our transportation system, which without I-5, our region is a huge difficulty. And they had a game plan where they talked about the flooding of 99, Highway 99 and I-5. And you'd have to anticipate the rainfall before it ever even hits the coast in order to achieve what they were projecting.
Right.
And trying to get people to evacuate when they don't see the storm is really difficult. But one thing we can do is streamline our maintenance efforts of what we have and repair what we already know needs to be repaired. Anyway, thank you very much. I think your efforts are good, but short term, we really have a significant problem.
Thank you for your comments. Thank you for emphasizing the importance of adequate infrastructure for all needs, access and evacuation. Mr. Kane.
Thank you. I know that the existing draft did not have an executive summary, so that might be a place where to approach this. And I did, River Partners did provide a lot of detailed comments about how to change text, in particular about how to bring graphics forward. There were some graphics that really make the point about how climate change risk could go up or could be managed through implementation in the Central Valley Flood Plan. But I think in thinking about those questions that Mary Jimenez asked, it's useful to think about what are the key points that the plan should really emphasize and repeat over and over again. I know DWR has correctly said they want to have a slimmed down document so that people can read it. And I would take it a step further, and I don't want to dumb it down and make it repetitive, but I think it's very useful to think about what are the main themes you want to present and make sure that those themes are reinforced in every chapter, starting with the executive summary. And so I would say that those themes are fourfold. Number one, remind people of the great progress our community has made. The flood community over the last decade is a community that's getting things done, getting along, and changing things on the ground. That's in stark contrast to some other communities out there. Number two, we need to ring the alarm bell about the climate change projections and the short and long-term impact that these flood events will have on Central Valley communities. Even if there's emergency response, if whole neighborhoods are flooded and people don't have insurance, that's going to result in intergenerational poverty. And there are studies that show that. We need to make that really clear and ring the alarm bell about these climate change projections. Number three, we need to provide the very good news that we have a plan. We have a plan to reduce flood risk. We need to clarify that plan is not a single bullet approach, but it's a portfolio of risk reduction measures, starting with wise land use, flood insurance, emergency preparedness, levee improvements where people already live on the floodplain, and then very importantly, multiple benefit projects that give the river more room and provide resilience over time. Jerry Galloway, the former general at the Corps of Engineers, I once heard him say, We build levees to provide 100-year protection, and then we have to live with them and maintain them every day. Multiple benefit projects provide a level of protection, and they provide resiliency and benefits every day. So those are a very popular way to move forward. We've been able to find funding for them. And I think we need to emphasize that. And then lastly, and perhaps very importantly, the plan will only make a difference if the legislature funds it. I think it was yesterday we heard about the governor's new water plan. It says almost nothing about the flood. We need to keep the discussion of flood front and center, even during drought. And the flood plan is a golden opportunity to make these points. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to call on my board member Countryman first, and then Kathy Schaefer. Member Countryman.
I think we're not exactly facing the truth of the existing situation. When I hear John's main points that need to be highlighted, it did not include the fact that maintenance has been way below what is deemed necessary for the existing system. And if you're going to start someplace to provide improved flood protection, it starts right there.
Mm-hmm.
If you can't maintain what you currently have, but you're going to go build more, there's a question there. What are we doing? Do we really have a plan that's functional if we can't do proper maintenance on it? And if we look in the report, we'll see that there's a huge deficit in funds made available for the maintenance that we feel is required on the system. So when we make those key points, make sure that that's one of them. Adequate maintenance of the existing system.
Thank you, Member Countryman. Bring that up as we're addressing what's missing in the plan. All right, Ms. Schaefer, and then Supervisor Conant. Ms. Schaefer.
Hi, thank you. I was going to wait till later to make my comments, but I want to use this opportunity to build on the comments that John just made. I was part of the independent review panel, and I have a couple of just kind of comments that build on John's comments and provide a few suggestions. Several years ago, my husband and I remodeled our home, and we thought it would be cost effective to simply remodel our vintage house. But like many homeowners embarking on a remodeling project, after removing the sheetrock, we discovered that it would have been more cost effective to tear down the house and start from scratch. And I would proffer in the modeling and the activities that you have that DWR is perhaps in that same position. The climate modeling that the CVFPB is built on was built on the Central Valley Hydrology Study, which was built on Bulletin 17C. And the independent review panel unanimously recommended that Bulletin 17C not be used going forward. It was developed in large part to support the FEMA 100-year mapping, and even FEMA no longer uses FEMA maps for pricing insurance. So you can have the finest craftsman remodeling your home, but if it's built on a deficient foundation, then it doesn't do you any good. So some of the, you have wonderful craftsmen building your models. I think it's just important to think about building them on a more stout foundation. So going forward, I'd like to encourage the ArcStorm 2.0 and support of the ArcStorm 2.0, as that can help to build a better foundation for you. Yesterday, the lead scientist from the Delta Independent Science Board started a discussion around the idea of implementing scenarios and scenario analysis. And ArcStorm 2.0 would be founded on a scenario analysis. So it provides an opportunity to conduct a scenario analysis, but it also provides you with a really good opportunity to have the conversations about what the impacts could possibly be. And so I want to just encourage the board to encourage the support of ArcStorm 2.0. Along with that, ArcStorm 2.0 would be using the advanced computing power of Oak Ridge National Labs. In the last few years, we've had amazing advances in those kinds of technologies, and I want to encourage the board to encourage investments in staff training and opportunities for the staff to grow and advance in these advanced modeling. And then lastly, I want to just highlight something that kind of has come out about the need for insurance. In a recent groundbreaking report by the Department of Insurance, it finds that insurance is an underappreciated resource in building climate resilience. And I want to applaud the existing CVFPB report for suggesting examining the opportunities for insurance and alternatives to increase the insurance take-up rates. And I want to congratulate or encourage the board to expand the close collaboration that has been started between DWR and the Department of Insurance and encourage investments in insurance, because as you have just mentioned, you are not going to be able to build your way out of that. So these comments are probably a little bit appropriate for later on, but I may have to jump off, and I wanted to just interject them. And I want to thank you so much for hosting these listening sessions and for being so open to taking comments. And then my last little line is that I don't think the board has taken credit for all the investments that we've made and highlighted how far we've come since the 1986 flood event. So you are all to be congratulated, and you should be kind of highlighting the good work that you have already done. Thank you.
Well, we appreciate that, and thank you very much for your comments. And again, I'm happy all this is being recorded. I said it wasn't a transcript, but I see that we have Mr. Peters, so we do. Now, Member Countryman, you might be next, but I'm going to call on a former person that I know from my former job, Supervisor Matt Conant.
Yes, thank you, everyone. I'd like to thank Joe and John and Mary Jane for their comments. I especially like Mary Jane's comments, but I think one step could be gone further. And when they talk about, John talked about intergenerational poverty caused by this flood. The 86 flood, there are still homes that haven't been totally rebuilt in that region from the 86 flood. And if you go drive by the Marysville Mall today, it's being torn down finally after almost 40 years.
Yay.
And
yay, finally.
Go in there. I understand a Costco's going in there, but my point is that these are truly, this is almost a generation past, and we're still doing rebuilding of those structures. The other thing I'd like to comment on is bypasses in the region. I'm going to move into my office. Hang on.
Are you out there on the highway, sir?
No, we're spraying today, so.
Okay.
Anyway, I apologize for that. Anyway, the bypasses I'm really concerned about, and I realize we've been going down this road for a long time of making habitat and bypasses. I'm very concerned about the impediment of water flows into those bypasses and through those bypasses because of that habitat that we've encouraged. And I think we really need to think long and hard about allowing that, and maybe those bypasses would be better used for annual production of agricultural products and not habitat. And I'll just leave it at that, and maybe somebody else can make comments on that as well. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Personal note, nice to see you. Member Countryman.
Yes, I just wanted to say that Kathy's comments were full of wisdom that we should all listen to. The big problem that the climate change analysis has had up to this point is its over reliance on probability and statistics, which aren't really applicable into a changing environment, because the data set that the statistics are being done on is changing constantly. And so that's why a arc storm approach is much sounder than the one based on statistics. And I don't want to go into, all of it, but this has been my main concern with the climate change. And we're not going to change the current analysis. It's way too late to do that. But for the next update, I think we need to really think about how can we unload this burden of trying to do a statistical analysis on a changing database. So I thank Kathy for her comments.
And we thank you for yours. You are the one who keeps us focused on the fact that we have outdated science and outdated standards and outdated data. So how we get there. All right. Former colleague, Supervisor Conley, your hand is up.
Thank you. Thank you for all you do. It was very interesting to listen in. And I didn't know if I wanted to speak, but then I thought maybe I could give you a little bit of a local feel on. I know that you look after the whole Central Valley, but as my former colleague knows, I represent Lake Oroville. So what we've discovered as a group of citizens, working on a citizens advisory group and working with some local businessmen that formed our own group, we found that the flood mapping is very inaccurate, particularly in the immediate area. There's assumptions made that a highway is a levee, for example, and we know that the flows historically were about 162 to 167,000 cubic feet per second. Yet we had back flooding, and they're showing flows of 250, which is very concerning to us. And so just in general, flood mapping has to be very accurate, as was evidenced by when the spillway failed. We over evacuated and put many people at risk that weren't necessarily need to be in risk. Entire neighborhoods that were too high that wouldn't flood, and all the congestion and stuff like that. So I think we need to really look at our flood mapping, make sure it has the most current technological data available to make it accurate so that we can build the evacuation routes. And then we have to have a rational way to evacuate. The other thing is we've discovered that flows aren't actually measured in our basin the way you would think. They don't go up and measure all the individual streams to get an understanding of what is contributing to high water events. They depend on the rising of the lake and calculations on outflows from the lake. Well, I hope that isn't the way it is across the state, because that leaves room for big errors, and big errors are going to cause big floods. And I think that we need to support, as a state, more scenario studies where more than one basin is receiving water at the same time. It could be the west side gets one of these new flash flood events, and the east side gets a flash flood event, and that contributes to the river, whether it's in the San Joaquin or the Sacramento. I think that these studies can't be based on old assumptions and old studies, because the patterns, definitely climate change is real, and it's changing the way that we have to project floods and understand it. And I think investment in those types of studies are important. The last thing I'd like to say is thank you for all your efforts, but please help me keep safety before water delivery. When you live right here by this big old bathtub, and we're talking about different ways of managing water, it's got to be primarily for public safety. And that's who I represent, right? I mean, over your water deliveries to Southern California or wherever the Bay. And thanks for having me here. I hope I didn't talk too much. I'm going to come back. I'm really enjoying it. I see you're doing a lot of hard work. I'll look at getting some written comments to you.
Thank you. My experience with you is that, no, you did not talk too much this time. Supervisor. We got three supervisors here.
Mary Jane, quit laughing. Mary Jane, quit laughing.
Supervisor Conan, are you still wanting to talk or do you need to put your hand down? I'm going to assume that you just didn't put it down.
I lowered my hand, I thought.
Well, we're still working on this, right? Okay, I see no more hands. Where are we at? We're at slide 12, so we got 12 to go. Let us take a 5-minute break right now. I need to heat up my coffee cup. So 5-minute break right now, no one come back. Thank you. Okay, this is the 1-minute warning. Hey, Ruth, who is up next? Is it still Mary?
It's still Mary, yes.
Okay, and I think we're going to, the slide that's up there now is the one we just finished. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right, I'm going to ask people to gather again. If you're within audio, please come back. All right, thank you for that break. We all stretched. Our workshop is going to continue now. So I'm going to call again on Mary Jimenez from DWR. We're now on slide, informational slide 15 of 25. So it's a minute.
Thank you, President Dolan, and thank you for the break. I appreciate it. We're ready to take over to the next part of the discussion. So as I mentioned before the break, some aspect of our public comments on clarity of information in the flood plan and messaging with respect to climate change also is an opportunity to improve our graphics, asking to take a closer look at improving our graphical displays of technical results. So as a bit of a foundation, on the CVFPB, going back to the 2012 plan and 2017 update, we have had and continue to have system-wide maps of our technical results. It has been and is an ongoing challenge to develop maps with the right level of content and metrics per locations at the scale that we're working at in the Central Valley. We have two large river basins that we're dealing with in both the Sacramento and San Joaquin, and so we've been working on how to display system-wide results. Along with looking at ways to improve system-wide graphics and what adjustments we can make, we're also considering adding other graphics that can provide a greater clarity on our findings where that might be useful. So that's just a screenshot from the 2017 plan and the system-wide results that we reported back then. Next slide. And so I'm just going to share a couple of conceptual examples that we're wrestling with. I did want to say these are just concepts. So the numbers on the slide are not even tied to anything in our technical work right now. It's literally just a mock-up so that we could talk through different ways to conceptually display results and get kind of different takes on what type of displays might resonate better with the main audience and different readers. So two concepts that we're talking about right now are shown on the slide to display life loss at a system-wide level. The option on the left, you'll see would highlight some of those major numbers out of the technical analyses in different ways with some people icons and some numbers alongside the system-wide map. Yet a different option on the right shows a little bit more of a graphical display of those numbers. Alongside the system-wide map. So this is just two examples of how we might highlight technical results in a different way in a map type format as concepts. But I did want to share this early thinking with the board and others today as these type of visual concepts for thoughts on these examples or any other system-wide results type visual ideas you might have to help us make these types of revisions, because we do want to improve our system-wide result maps to be to tell a better story and to be more readily understandable if we can. So I'll pause on the life loss example. We do have a similar one on economics as well. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that. I do know that there were, apart from all the editorial comments of clarity and spelling errors, you would think I wrote it. There were comments on sort of clarity and more punch to graphics. So I do know that the team is working on that. Mr. Kane, did you want to comment on this example?
I River Partners specifically added comments on this. There is a graphic that shows these planning areas that are shown in yellow and green here. I think there's one that shows the planning area with the flood plan and the planning area without the flood plan, and then it has some numbers in it that vary between the two. But what was very confusing is the actual mapped area. There's nothing there that changes. So I'd really caution you about how you're using this planning area map, and the inundation area might not change that much between the two, but the results would. So the fact that you're using this again like a map and then some numbers next to it, I felt compelled to speak up because I thought the last one where you did that was really problematic. And I'm looking at this, I'm going, should I be looking at the map? What's the information in the map here? Or should I be looking at the numbers? And I think you want somebody to look at one thing when they're looking at a graphic.
Okay. I'm going to copy this and get it to you, and you're going to do some sketching on it. Amy Merrill.
Yeah, thanks. I guess, maybe it's a clarification that I need. That 167 lives lost in 2072, that's not annualized. That's assuming that you have the big event, right? In 2072, you have one big event, and that's how many lives are assumed to be lost. Is that? I guess I need clarification on that.
Yeah, I mean, since these numbers aren't directly out of our flood plan, it's just a mock-up right now. I would say that, yeah, they would be, pulling from the technical results in one of the climate scenarios, from 2072.
I guess. Well,
Yeah.
Then I guess my comment is just to ensure that you're not giving some annualized number that on average 5 lives will be lost over 50 years, so it'll be 250 lives. Give the full number.
These are expected annual life loss. So you're right. It's not a deterministic.
Yeah, I think that's really misleading, right? Because we need to have the actual number of what kind of Katrina number of lives could be lost in a big event.
Okay, good catch, good note.
Okay.
And when we talk about something as serious as this, it should be as clear as possible.
Exactly.
We don't need to scare people, but we don't need to overstate.
Yeah, I think we do need to scare people a little bit.
Well, it's kind of like, oh my gosh, we need to be prepared. Yes, but not to the frozen, can't move, can't think state. All right, we can move to the next slide.
Sure. So this is just a different example around the economic results. So expected annual damage as being our metric for economic indicators. So two concepts shown here on the slide. Again, these numbers do not reflect actual numbers out of our analysis right now. It's just to show different ways that we could visually display the information. And so the one on the left is more of a graphical display with the bar charts showing expected annual damage across the range of climate change scenarios that we evaluated, along with the existing. And then the one on the right is a little more of a not so graphical, but more using the numbers and other other visuals to display relative magnitudes and numbers. So with and without investment and with the climate change scenarios. Sorry, I had a loud noise in the house here. So, but yeah, I wanted to pause here as well and get any thoughts on different graphical displays for the economic indicators system-wide. So I'm assuming some of the same comments made about the map and the graphics for life loss also apply here for economics, but any other additional comments on the display as it pertains to economics?
There's just a chat, so I'm going to read it out loud. Don't annualize, give number for the big event, not divided by the number of years. So did that. Aha. Couple names I have called on before. Mr. Kane.
I'll try to be quick. The current plan and previous presentations have had an excellent graphic that shows how the curve and expected annual damages goes up for the different climate change scenarios without action, and how it goes up much less or levels out in the San Joaquin with the plan. I think it's like 3-23 or something is the figure. It's excellent. It's, in my opinion, it's way better than these graphs. Thank you.
All right, we'll check that out. Mr. Steve Cowden.
Okay, can you hear me?
I can hear you.
You can?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you. I'm on a different computer, so I just want to make sure. Oh, we've been following the discussion on EAD versus event damage. This has been a continuing discussion. You're beginning with the comp study. We've always had this discussion. I think it's really coming to focus now, and I think that's really good. Obviously, EAD is the numbers we typically use for a planning study like this. But as you point out, that number can, it kind of masks what could happen during an actual event and how you respond to that. So we're waiting for the new numbers from ArcStorm. I'm curious to see what that's going to show.
Mr. Cowden?
Yes?
Just for my edification, are you saying EAD or something, and what does that stand for?
Oh, okay. When I say EAD, expected annual damage, thank you. So we typically expected annual damage is what we use for these studies, but as you're pointing out, that can mask what actually happens during a real event, and how to respond to that. We, at our briefing on August 26th, we were going to make a suggestion how we can use LifeSim, the LifeSim modeling, which is event-based. We can use LifeSim modeling to not only generate the information that goes into an expected annual life loss calculation, which we've been doing up to now, but we can also get event-based life loss from using LifeSim. And we can use LifeSim to inform local emergency managers how their current procedures, how changes to those procedures might, maybe reduce life loss or maybe just the opposite, depending upon where they're at. So I'm getting ahead of ourselves, but we're going to discuss this on August 26th briefing, how we can use LifeSim for, event type analysis and emergency planning.
When you say August 26th, you're talking about the board meeting? So
yes, the board briefing. Yes, the briefing.
Okay, you'll be giving a presentation on behalf of?
Yes, Joanna, Lou, and myself will be giving a presentation on the life loss results by the regional flood management planning areas. These areas broken, there's 6 RFMPs within these 2 basins. So we have the results by the RFMPs, which is the first time we've done that. But these will be focusing on life loss results. We'll also be talking about making some suggestions how we can use LifeSim going forward to look at event life loss. That's not to say we're going to get away from expected annual life loss, we will always be using that, or expected annual damage, but there may be some ways we can supplement that information.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Desjardins. I see your hand again.
Thank you. I just had a thought. I live in Santa Cruz County, and there was 28% of the population of the county had to evacuate in the CZU August lightning complex fire. It was mandatory evacuation orders. And I don't know if with the economic damages, if it's really looked at the displacement issues. But as somebody who studies cascading risks, there's gonna, if we have one of these extreme floods, we're gonna have enormous numbers of people displaced. One of the statistics I bring up is the 240,000 people who live in the 1 in 500 year floodplain in Stockton. That's going to become the 1 in 200 year floodplain with climate change. And thinking about that number of people displaced from flooding, and where they would go it's pretty scary.
Well, I live in a county that's faced immense displacement for non-flood reasons, but other dangers and disasters. And you're right. It's serious, overwhelming, and long-term. All right. Any other hands raised?
Fifth chair.
Oh, forgot about my board. I apologize. Member Grego.
No worry. I think that these graphs are important. They tell a story, but really looking at this one specifically, it really doesn't talk about, it does a snapshot, but it really doesn't talk about what happens in year 2, 3, 4, and 5. Because as it was stated before, you don't just recover from something like this, a levee failure. It takes decades to get over the economic part of it. And so I think that really tells the bigger story, is that this goes on for years. These losses go on for years, and it takes decades to recover from something like this. And I think that really has an impact when you look at it. And then on the lives lost, a lot of that determines when the event happened. If it happens in the middle of the night, you're going to have more casualties. The other thing is if you don't have that education, and I'll take an example in 97 when the levee failed on the Feather River, it was during the evening, and people did not know which way to go. And so the one particular person went right into the water, not realizing that you need to go into higher elevation. They went south and they hit the water, and that was their demise. But the other point I want to bring up is the mall that has been torn down in the community of Linda after 40 years. If there wouldn't have been a second story on that mall, there would have been a lot more lives lost. They were able to get to the second story, and they were a helicopter off the roof. So there's a lot of different scenarios about how life is lost and what happens, different times of the day, or, whether you have like a high school or like a mall in the area where the flooding occurs, that really determines life loss. And so I know you can't pinpoint it. I know it's an impossible number, but it really should reflect what could happen.
Thank you. Any other board members at this point? Mr. Cowden, is your hand still raised or not?
Actually, I just raised it again. Mary made some excellent points as to the types of factors that should be included in a life loss analysis. And we have included those, especially using the life sim modeling. We have included those factors. The life loss is based upon the time of day when people are in structures, during the day or at work. We account for that, night versus day. We account for the age of persons. Are they over 65 or under 65? We account for the structure type. How many floors or how many stories are in the structure? So in these expected annual life loss results you're looking at, we have taken those factors into account. Within LifeSim, we can actually estimate life loss for an event as well. So I think that's what I'm going to talk about on the 26th. That suggestion I was talking about earlier. We can actually go one step further and look at event life loss as well. So you can kind of see the difference between that and expected annual life loss. But the bottom line is the factors you mentioned are very important in the life loss analysis, and we are taking those into account right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. I'm going to ask that we proceed. I see no more hands. All right. Next slide.
All right, next slide. Thank you.
Mhm.
So, a natural adjacency to what we were just discussing, right? So the next group of comments around the relationship between event-based scenarios, such as the arc storm. So a good topic that we're continuing to discuss today, and the analysis, the system-wide analysis of the CVFPB and how those two work together. So you'll see here on the slide just a really brief snapshot of the definition of the arc storm as that major scenario, one of the major scenarios that we've been talking about today. And so that is the premise that it's a storm that produces extreme precipitation. That would happen fairly rarely. So a very large, rare precipitation event. And that the runoff produced with that extreme precipitation event varies widely between 10 years and 1,000 years, depending on what location you're at in the system. So big precipitation event, the effect on runoff would vary depending on where you're at with the system, but it is a storm scenario. All right. Hopefully that was okay to introduce it. Thank you.
It is, yes. Next.
All right, next slide. And so we are looking at ways to expand or clarify the text in this flood plan to talk more about event-based scenarios in the arc storm. We've had a number, as I mentioned, we had a number of comments on it. We're having a really good dialogue today. And so our team is recommending digging into the flood plan to try to clarify some of this information. So this is back to what we were just talking about. So the CVFPB system-wide flood risk analyses and kind of the standard of practice that we're using right now, consistent with flood risk management studies. I did want to reinforce that the system-wide flood risk analyses that we've done account for an entire range of potential flood events, right? Small 10-year all the way up to 500-year plus. So it does encompass storms the size of arc storm in the full range of flood events that we analyzed. So it is consistent and compatible in that way. So while they're not identical, right, they're not telling the same story, they do flange up in terms of the analyses that we looked at in the flood plan. Next slide. The importance and the purpose of the CVFPB to prioritize state flood system investments to reduce flood risk and consequences from large storms is an important premise to recognize as well, using a set of thresholds. So when we talk about the thresholds in the system-wide plan, it's looking at that 200-year for urban areas, that is our goal for urban areas, and the 100-year goal for small communities, and how we're prioritizing investments around that. Event-based scenarios such as the arc storm are further useful to identify and address gaps in emergency response, like we've been talking a lot about today. And also its importance in encouraging wise land use in floodplains. A lot of great discussion today about that, right? How do you really make it clear that these big events are coming? Here's the implications, and how can we use that to support implementation of the flood plan that includes emergency response and floodplain management and all of those sorts of activities that need to happen to implement this flood plan. So I would add that the consistency between the system-wide analysis of the CVFPB and the event-based scenarios and what is being learned from the arc storm is exciting. And there are further opportunities to continue to look at these different types of analyses together moving forward. And so I wanted to cover this aspect today to talk about event-based scenarios and CVFPB a little bit more. The next slide. I think I have one more. Nope, not yet. Okay, sorry, go back. So with that, I'll pause here for more questions or discussions around clarifying the relationship between the event-based scenarios and the flood plan analyses. Thank you.
I will ask for comments on that, just letting everyone know that this is going to be a specific subject at a board meeting. Member Countryman. Looks like you're muted. If you're talking, I can't hear you, Member Countryman.
Excuse me, sorry.
Sorry?
The arc storm work that has been done in the past has been sorely deficient. When they show huge floodplains and so forth, and I asked for the information like, well, what was the reservoir routings, what levees failed, where did the hydrographs come from? They weren't forthcoming with it. So, you know, we need an arc storm type analysis that's a true analysis that has rainfall, runoff, reservoir operations, and flood system, you know, functioning. So I just want to emphasize that the work that had been done previously really is not suitable for a flood plan analysis. Thanks.
Well, there'll be a presentation of that at some point today. I'm sure it will be recorded, and news reports will be plentiful. Desjardins, your hand is up.
Yeah, I did want to say, so I do know Mike Gettinger, and they looked at where the levees would be overtopped. There needs to be an open discussion about the limits of the ArcStorm 1 study, because I've seen, you know, discussions that just mischaracterize and straw man the ArcStorm studies. And Daniel Swain is doing ArcStorm 2.0, has been trying very hard to get funding to do the hydraulic routing. What happened with the previous hydraulic routing of ArcStorm was the consultant was 1.5 years into it, and DWR just pulled the funding. It must have shown some inconvenient truths. And we would like to see if some of that isn't around anymore.
Okay,
But
yeah,
it's really important.
Right, let's stop at that. Okay, thank you. Okay. I don't see any other hands, so we'll go ahead and proceed. Next slide.
Okay, thank you. We'll go on to the next slide. Okay, so the next set of comments were around creating a clearer and tighter tie between the climate change projections and our findings to the funding needs that are so urgent in our flood plan. There are a couple of ways that we're looking at addressing these comments. They're really good. And one way is trying to clarify what we mean by the state system-wide investment approach as the approach to guide investments versus the portfolio of actions that is included in the flood plan and updated every 5 years and generates the cost estimates and the funding need as part of the investment strategy. I also wanted to mention that there are two upcoming documents that we're working on alongside this main flood plan and the supporting documents. So we talked about this last week, but the call to action development is an important opportunity to get the message out there about the importance of the climate change projections and significance and making it tie to the funding needs. So that's one other location, in addition to clarifying some things in the main document. And also that we are producing a CVFPB funding brochure that is akin to some of the highlights documents we've prepared in the past. I understand there have been asks from a number of reviewers. What other kinds of highlights documents or summary documents are coming up that can be further useful for the state and our partners in describing climate change projections and funding needs. So those are two other documents we're working on where these thoughtful comments could further be addressed, as well as making some adjustments to clarify in the flood plan itself. But I wanted to share, the gist of that comment and kind of beg the question of how can we do that better? We know it's so important to have a clear story about what we're learning about climate change and why it's so important to get the funding and what it means for the 25 to 30 billion in this flood plan. With that, I just had this one slide teed up and was hoping to hear some thoughts and discussion on it. Thank you.
I'm looking to see if there's any hands up, but my comment is I really appreciate identifying the photos. So thank you for that. I'm always trying to figure out where is this. So that looks pretty darn familiar to me, Marysville. Okay. Comments on these, what will be within the plan or additional explanation documents or useful documents as we provide information ongoing. Ms. Desjardins? You might just want to keep your hand up continuously, huh?
Oh, sorry. I just had one brief comment. So I did put a link in the chat, but you might look at NOAA's 2022 sea level rise projections have a really nice example of top line messages. And one of them is that there are uncertainty in out-year projections and that continued high emissions is going to make it worse. Just wanted to suggest that that might be something you could also do in your messaging.
Okay. That comments in the chat have been noted and retained.
Thank you.
Thanks for that. Okay. Any other answers? Don't see that. Okay. More slides. 10 minutes, right?
Thank you. I think we're getting closer. Might have a.
Yeah, I was trying to do the count there for a while. I thought we would be taking a lunch break, but now I'm not sure. So yeah, thank you.
No problem. Okay, so I believe this is the last major topic we have. So we had a number of comments around, I'll call this the more forward-looking piece, right? Moving towards 27 and beyond, based on what we're learning about climate change now and the urgency, and also around the need to further develop and understand flood management equity and put that into practice in our investments. Recommending, ways to address that by updating the state system-wide investment approach. So recognizing that climate change and flood management equity are major drivers in flood management that could further influence the next flood plan update and beyond. I wanted to reinforce that refining the state system-wide investment approach is an iterative effort. So every 5 years is a new opportunity to look back at what we have, what we're learning, and what we should do about it. And then just that I'm eager to continue the scoping discussions on the next update. That will be a process over time as we get closer to completing the 22 plan and get started on the next one. So I'm glad that we had these types of comments that were forward looking in terms of, okay, now what? What does that mean to the next flood plan update? And I wanted to bring that comment up for discussion today, and just, with a couple of the caveats shown on the slide that I'm glad we got the comment. I want to reinforce that updating the plan and the state system-wide investment approach is iterative. In other words, every time we're trying to do better, and that we will have continued scoping discussions on the 27 plan. So with that, I'll pause on this slide for thoughts or comments. Thank you.
Planning is never static, and we do updates that have some finality to them that okay, this is the update plan, we'll adopt it. But things don't stop there. And we want to be sure that we do the best plan that we can for 2017. We want to be sure we continue to make improvements and improve communication, but we'll just start working on what next to be done. I'm looking in the chat, we're copying it all, and I'm looking for hands up, which I don't see. I think you have one more.
Okay, I think there's just one more, some parting thoughts on kind of where else and what else on climate change. So as we've been trying to reinforce today, you know, the 2022 plan, it's an important opportunity, but it's certainly not the end of the road or the be all end all of everything going on for climate change. So there are other ongoing state efforts to address climate change and its impact on water resources more broadly that I wanted to hit on for awareness today, and just also offer up any help myself or my team can provide in connecting folks with others in the department that are working on these efforts. So the watershed resilience studies that are being scoped and will be underway soon for the San Joaquin watersheds in that initiative. The California Water Plan has a number of efforts supporting their next flood plan, not flood plan, excuse me, their next water plan update around climate change, science, watershed resilience, and equity and water management as well. So I wanted to give a nod to those ongoing efforts and make that offer to connect to individuals if that's helpful, and just also to hear if there's any thoughts today from the board or others interest in those other ongoing state efforts. So, thank you.
The answer of if this entity of the flood board organization is interested in these studies, absolutely. We do talk quite intensely about the need to all work together and integrate these plans. There's a lot of interest on my part, and I know board members, that as we address improvements, revisions, and repairs of the flood plan, these other plans certainly come into play. And one I would like you to add is groundwater recharge. The more that we can understand the intensity of storms and runoffs that will occur and the great need to recharge the groundwater in the Central Valley, those two absolutely work together. We're working on the flood board and its staff. We've done some addressing of updating really what is an antiquated floodway mapping and designation to bring it into the 21st century as opposed to what it was 50 years ago. And so that will help with all of these, including our work. So, Ms. Desjardins, you took my advice of keeping your hand up.
Yeah, this is, I just wanted to say, so I did modeling at Los Alamos National Lab and NASA Ames Research Center, and I knew some of the fluid dynamics folks. And there is an issue that there did some studies with much higher resolution grids in Europe, and they found you know, there was unprecedented flooding in Europe last year, and they found that it brought in some features of the atmospheric rivers that that showed the kind of increased flooding that they'd seen. And we have been very much supporting increased investments in water management science, but there are limitations at the resolution that we're doing, and there is concern, or Stephen Ramsdorf said at the Europe flooding that it was kind of beyond what had been captured by their models. So I'm hoping that there can be more research to address this. And second, I wanted to say I very much support FloodMAR as a strategy for replenishing groundwater, but we also need to be aware of its limitations. it will moderate peak flood flows, but these really high flood flows, it's not going to do so much for. And so I am concerned about that needs to not be a primary strategy for flood management. We really need to look at protecting lives and property. Thank you.
I know you'll read the totality of the plan to know that there's lots of strategies, lots of needs. Okay, thank you.
This is more with respect to the California Water Plan, which has an emphasis.
Oh, yeah, well, we'll have a workshop on that at some point, but we'll let the appropriate folks do it. Okay. Any other hands raised? Any board members want to make a comment? This has just been really interesting and impactful workshop here today. So thank you. I think the next slide is to ask for discussion.
That's right. I think that's the end of what I have, President Dolan. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. And there's a lot of effort in putting these together that provides clarity without overwhelming and enough. Mr. King, do you mind if I ask the board first?
Oh, I'm sorry. Go, of course.
No, that's okay. Board members, comments on today, comments going forward, comments whatever. Mr. Ramirez, we've missed you. You're up.
Thank you, President Dolan. I missed you too. I wanted to start and just thank the folks who are attending and all the people that have commented. It's, I think, obvious to me, I'm sure to all of us, that this is the topic that has gleaned the greatest interest from our Central Valley friends and communities, and I'm not surprised, and I'm certainly thankful for the attention that everybody's giving this. A lot of great suggestions were made, and I know that those have been captured, and folks will work to try to respond and address those. I think what I wanted to say was maybe more directed at my colleagues on the board, but I certainly want other folks to help us with this. I'm thinking about what we do with all of this, and I mean the board, right? We're not doing the modeling. We're not doing the analyses. We're not doling the funding out. We have 2 plans behind us. It honestly makes me a little concerned to think about scoping for 27, because that's 5 years from now, and whatever happens in 5 years from now will take years and decades to implement. I'm really focused on what we can do in the next 3 months to identify what we think the most important things are to do next, and how they can be done, and who needs to do them if it's not us. One of the things I'm grateful for that we have is the scale and scope of our authority. It's a unique state entity to have the responsibility geographically that we do, and the chance to address this, because almost everything that has to be done will eventually end up at the board. The thing that's frustrating for me is that we're often waiting for things to happen. People have to bring them to us. We don't have the funding that we can dangle as enticement, and we have standards that are old. And to Joe's point, we're running analyses that might not be a strong foundation upon which to set new standards. So that's where I'm trying to focus my energy right now, and we're going to work as we were directed, President Dolan, by you, to help prepare something for the board to consider at a future meeting. I think you tasked Secretary Johnson and I with that responsibility, and so I just wanted to share those thoughts today, so that everybody else who's listening is aware of them and can help us structure the board resolution, and we'll draft one for people to consider and to sink their teeth into. But I'm really focused on that part of it because I've only been doing this for 25 years, which doesn't seem like very long compared to some of the people that are here today. There's a lot of experience And I'm looking forward to hearing from people who haven't spoken up yet, if they're going to be brave enough to raise their hand. And we need everybody who is here, right? There are some people, the collective group is really impressive, and I think demonstrates the breadth of not just the interest, but the impact. And that's telling, and I think, and in some ways really powerful. And I want to take advantage of that opportunity and do what we can to really increase the weight of our comments as a group so that we can continue to make progress. It does feel better than it did 25 years ago, but honestly, in some ways, it's frustrating to not have made more progress, especially in the San Joaquin Valley. The things that we're going to point to as examples are the same examples we pointed to 20 years ago. And some of those projects aren't done yet. And most of them have multiple fund sources. They're all multi-benefit projects, or most of them are, but they also have multiple fund sources. We're making it really hard for people to get this work done because we don't provide them a path that is a straight shot to some kind of resolution. We're making them piece together good ideas with really diverse and not very integrated funding on the state side. And I think we can do something about that too. I think we need to find a way to make it easier for people to get things done that are good ideas. And it is about all the things people talked about. It's about public safety, but it's also about a place where people live, right? Like we want people to see these rivers as benefits to their communities and open spaces. And we have to think about the ways we want to engage the people that live along these corridors, not just the people that are making decisions about funding. They need to be involved, not just in how to get away when something's happening that's terrible, that threatens their lives, but also how to spend the other 363 days enjoying those places and having access to these rivers and the resources that they provide. That's another big opportunity. And I know that it's something that has, in the last 10, 15 years, really been elevated by the legislature when they made the changes to the board and given us a higher platform, I think, a stronger platform and a better platform to advocate for some of these improvements. So I'll stop there. Thank you, President Dolan. I just wanted to sort of create a little bit of a frame for us to start to work on as we move towards October.
Through the chair.
Thank you, Member Ramirez. We are all trying to figure out, as we revised and approved this, how do we do that best decision possible? Member Grego.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you, Tim, for that eloquent comments that you made. I couldn't agree with you more. And I really appreciate the comments that we heard today. I liked the idea of a chapter of communications. I think that's, how can you go wrong with that? I mean, communications, that's what we do. And the comment about us being, our name is protection. And so I think that, you know, and I've mentioned this before, is that we need to be the advocates, you know, for, you know, funding, a reliable funding source, just like any other infrastructure has. They have a reliable funding source, but this doesn't. And we need that, whether it's from the state or the feds. I think that, you know, those are not only the only thing, and that is regulations. I mean, if you look at the federal government, a lot of these regulations were, you know, they were developed back in the 60s and 70s, and they don't relate to what we're doing today. And so the process is what stops us from being successful and accomplishing these goals in a reasonable time. To say that a project should take 40 years is unreasonable, to say the least. Some of the things that we encounter through our board meetings, it's just, and I know Joe Countryman has been the biggest, you know, he's been the loudest voice on our board about some of these ridiculous regulations, you know, whether they come from the state or from the feds. And I agree with him. You know, those things are barriers that stop these projects or make these projects even more expensive or keep the, you know, the locals from thinking they can reach these goals. And so I think that for me, I think, the policy decision makers from either the state or the federal government need to hear it from us. They need to hear and they need to see this plan, and they need to understand the importance of what we're doing here as it relates to public safety. Thank you. Thank you for your comments.
Thank you. That's our mission. All right, Mr. Kane, your hand's up. Let's move to the next slide.
I'll be quickly, just thank you, particularly to Mary Jimenez and her staff. The presentation really did elicit a number of questions and good discussion going, I thought. Two, I really felt like it addressed some of the most of the comments that we made. I'm still quite concerned about the graphics issue. And then lastly, I want to say thanks to all of the people that really worked to get the word out about the workshop, and to the supervisors that attended. I couldn't attend the last workshop because I was on vacation, and I heard that I expect this one was much more participatory, thanks to the actions of people that really reached out to get attendance up. It makes a difference.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And you came back from your trip. That helped as well. I've moved to public, but there I got Board Member Johnson. You raised your hand, calling on you.
I didn't. I had to be fast. I didn't realize how fast we were turning off this.
Never.
I'll start by just thanking everybody for the discussion today and for showing up and engaging in the way that people have, and Mary Jane and Tim, for your comments. I have a question that I'd like to pose actually for the group, which could be discussion today or people, thinking about it and coming back to, to us or to me offline. But as I do it, just a comment, we've heard some people looking back today, Tim, about how we got engaged, and I'm doing the same thing today. Some of my first job out of college was working on climate change issues. As one of the first handful of people at US EPA who could do it. We couldn't use those words or global warming. We called it global change. And was reading the then still fairly new work product from the IPCC. It was probably the first one, and had a job just immediately subsequent to that where we were tasked with communicating a lot of this work, as part of a federal team, and distinctly remember, the conversations about the communications, but also people telling us to tone it down, for lack of a better word. The things that we were saying and the way we were describing the risk was going to be alarmist, and people would tune it out, and we were gonna lose engagement, from folks. And they weren't wrong, but flash forward 30 years, I think IPCC is in the middle of, round 6 or something. And the way that we were wrong in the communications turns out that in every case we were lowballing it. And what we've seen already to date has come at us faster and stronger than what we would have said, based on all of that. And we, the time is, far gone, for us to be still hung up on some of these things. And so, number one, I just really, really want to thank everybody who was here with really good suggestions about communications. And I'll be following up with some of you offline. And if there's other folks here who want to follow up with, good tangible suggestions, I'm all ears. Number two, as to the models, I think all of us are all for continuous improvements on the models. And this round of modeling is better than the last round. The next round will be better than this one. But we can't get hung up on waiting for the next models and the next round of things that are better as we make decisions. We know a lot, and the core conclusions from this round are not that different from what we had 5 years ago in important ways. And so I really want to emphasize from my perspective, and I hope from the board and the state's perspective and everybody, the imperative to be using what we've got, while we're also improving the models and working on that. And so my question, for the crowd, and again, you can take this offline or people, today, is for people who are, those of you who are out there designing projects, working, for LMAs, other local governments talking about, land use and decision making. How are you factoring in the, existing work, with climate change projections and risk into your decision making? And given what those models say, and are there things that you need from us or for the state of California that would assist you in distilling that for your decision making? I'm thinking things like design standards and how you're thinking about it for your design standards and choice of like project types. And are there things, to Tim's point, that we could be doing in the next few months that would help you that are not yet in the plan? Or haven't yet been developed, outside of the plan.
Thank you for that. So we will ask all 90 of you to communicate with board members Ramirez and Johnson on that. You can talk to the rest of us, but you two are drafting resolution. There are more things in the chat. They're all copied. They're all saved. Deja Dan, are you keeping your hand up?
Yeah, I just had one observation that there's 99 participants, and people might be a little bit shy about speaking out, but in the Delta Science Program Salinity Management Workshop, they have breakout groups, and you could potentially structure a workshop and have breakout groups with different board members, and you might have more interaction, because I agree that's really important. And thank you, Brian Johnson, for trying to facilitate that.
We do. Yeah, thank you for that. Outreach, communication, and having a forum that the public can communicate is a very high priority at the board. I don't see any other hands raised. Any closing comments from our staff?
Hi, Jane, it's Ruth Darling with the Flood Board again. The last slide is just a reminder of the schedule. So this is our last workshop, and we'll be working diligently over the next 2 months on addressing comments on the plan, as well as the board's resolution, preparing for October 28th.
Thank you for that. Yes, this is the last official workshop on the plan with a theme and an analysis. Other avenues are, pretty sure we're going to organize the advisory committee at some point that's convenient and accessible to everyone. We have a coordinating committee on the 4th Wednesday of each month, the Wednesday preceding the board meeting, and can always add that for more discussions. And then, of course, there's emails and phone calls. Ms. Desjardins, do you still have your hand up?
Just one real brief thing. So National Oceanic and Atmospheric Association has a really nice set of 7 principles for risk communication that also apply to flooding. And I just wanted to point out to people that I put it in the chat, and there's also a workshop scheduled, I believe, on August 24th. And you might consider looking at them as well.
Thank you for that. Yes, that date, I know on my calendar has 5 other things, and I know it does for others. But everybody was gone in July, and they doubled up this month, by my observation. We'll get through it. Thank you for giving us that. Well, we could take a break or we could end the workshop. So do people want to talk anymore? This PowerPoint will be available for people to look at. We've got a lot of notes here, and we're going to be following up with some of you individually and all of you for your comments. Are we ready to adjourn? Any objection to that? Say something or
Goodbye.
workshop is adjourned. Thank you all, presenters and especially participants. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks, Jane. Thanks,
Thank you,
everybody.
Jane.
Thank you.